Welcome to the Dad Nation podcast, where men go from good to great in their life and love. Now more than ever, our world needs strong, courageous, and compassionate men, because we believe that when the dad gets better, the whole family wins. Now, this movement is called Dad Nation, but ultimately this is for the wives and the children and the generations to come, because we also believe that every wife and child deserves a husband who is pursuing greatness. My name is Mitchell Osmond, and I'm so thrilled and I'm so humbled and I'm grateful that you've chosen to spend your next few moments with me today. I know that time is the most precious resource that you could give somebody, so it's not lost on me how much it means that you're giving me your time today. So it's my intention to bring you value, and that's exactly what we're going to do today, my friends. Today we are talking with a gentleman by the name of Chris McKenna. He is the founder of Protect Young Eyes, and he's the executive director of the Protect Young Eyes Foundation. He's a leading advocate for digital safety. His efforts include influential testimony before the U.S. Senate and co-authoring the Child Device Protection Bill. They've led to significant legislative movement. Chris also advises global tech companies, has spoken at the World Economic Forum, and was featured in Childhood 2.0, while his organization educates parents and schools worldwide on digital safety. So today we are going to get into it, how to protect your children from digital dangers. We get into it all today, my friends. So listen, if you have children, if you have teens in your home, you're going to need to listen to this episode, because Chris brings some incredible wisdom and practical tips for y'all today, okay? So listen, I'm going to jump straight into it. So we got a ton of good stuff today. I know this episode's going to be a little bit longer than normal, but trust me, my friend, it is worth it. Okay, let's jump into it. Well, welcome to the Dad Nation podcast, Chris. I'm so excited to have you here today. And I introduced you a little bit to the guys before we jumped on this conversation. But just as we jump into the time, I just want to just say publicly that I just am such a fan of what you're up to, what you're doing. I believe with so much conviction that our world needs more of what we're going to talk about today. And I just want to say, man, keep doing the great work. I'm so excited for you to share all of your wisdom and knowledge with the guys who are going to be listening today. And as you do that, for anybody who maybe hasn't met you or heard of your stuff yet, could you just give us a little bit of like who you are, Chris, and your background, maybe a bit of a genesis story of Protect Young Eyes, and yeah, let us hear it.
Well, Mitchell, this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't know if you ever expected to be on the other side of podcast interviews like this when you were graduating or heading to college, but this is certainly not what I envisioned. So I'm supposed to be a partner at Ernst & Young, I believe at the moment, but that wasn't what what God had in mind for me. So, but that's my background. I have a consulting background. I worked in business risk, helping companies stay out of trouble. And that sounds like a funny way to start a conversation about technology, but it's important because it frames the way that I see things. It frames the way that I ultimately saw technology and decided to jump into what is now Protect Young Eyes. After I was about 12 years working at Ernst & Young, I was called into ministry. So I then led a large junior high ministry at my local church. Also did church finance with that kind of CPA background. But the time frame of that, Mitchell, is important. It was from 2009 to 2016. Right. So that's the rise of Instagram. That's the rise of social media. That's the rise of smartphones. And it's the first time in history that we decided it was a good idea to put porn in kids' pockets. And as a guy who had been exposed to pornography as a child, who struggled compulsively with pornography as a young adult and into marriage and adulthood, who had finally kicked that issue to the curb, I then watched us put that monster in their pockets. And that felt like a bad idea. I didn't have science. I didn't have anything other than that felt like a really bad idea. If the 30-year-old version of me with all the tools that I had and a beautiful wife, an amazing family, love the Lord, all these things around me still did not have the ability to fend off that monster one-on-one. What chance did those amazing 12-year-olds in my ministry have? Right. So that's the start. It was a closed Facebook group that was launched as Digital Kids. I did research. I was telling parents about these new apps, right? Here's this new app called Snapchat, parents. Have you heard of it? Your kids have. And was trying to educate them. And then that led to launching protectyoungeyes.com in 2015 after a news story that created a lot more publicity for us. So I was like, wow, we got to now launch something. And now that's led to doing this full time. Did it as a side hustle for a while. I went to Covenant Eyes for a number of years, worked there in digital marketing, a service that I loved. It's the service I use to beat pornography, to overcome my pornography issue. But now I'm doing this full time with the team of presenters. We travel the country, sometimes internationally, do hundreds of presentations, curriculum in schools, consulting with schools, trying to get kids back to a phone-free existence, or minimally educate enough parents to make informed decisions about the digital spaces where they're putting their children, which are almost always, in terms of goals, we must never forget that almost all the digital spaces where we put our children have goals for our children that are different than ours.
Hmm. Wow.
And I want more and more amazing dads who are listening to this and caregivers just to understand that you're always going to be, if you want things that are good and pure and honorable and noble for your sons and daughters, you are seldom going to find a consistent stream of information in digital spaces that they love that are good, excellent, noble, and honorable.
Mm.
Right. And so I just want to make sure everybody understands that before we drop them in so that we can make sure that it does them no harm.
Hmm. Wow. Well, hey, thank you just for your transparency and honesty with your journey and your struggles. And just, man, it's powerful what happens when people can step into this and use something that's been a struggle to create something beautiful. And so I love that. Just real quick before we jump in, though, you had mentioned that you had started with telling people about Snapchat, and I think probably. I mean, I'm surprised at how many parents don't necessarily realize how dangerous that is. But I think maybe Snapchat is a little bit more well known, I guess, as in parenting circles, that maybe it's a program that we need to be careful with, or app for our kids. But what would be just an example of some, new apps that are coming out or new programs that are coming out that kids want to be on that perhaps they need to be careful about? Can you think of any?
Yeah, well, so regardless of what it is, they all play by the same playbook. It's all about attention. It's all about how can I hook into the limbic system of a child, right? So in order for us to understand, and I know people will be listening to this, so you can't really see what I'm doing, but what I sometimes will do in front of parents is I'll hold an iPhone in my hands and I'll say, in order for us to understand what's happening down here, and I'll point to the phone,
Mm,
I tell them, you first have to understand what's happening up here, and I'll point to the head, because we make decisions and we behave because of our brain. It responds to stimuli in certain fairly predictable ways. Now, there's always variations just because of nature and nurture, but there's some predictability, especially when it comes to our amazing teens who are in a unique developmental phase. And the apps know this, right? Our
mhm,
apps, especially social media, are very attuned to adolescent development, and specifically adolescent neurological development. So it could be Real, it could be TikTok, it could be Snapchat, it could be Instagram, it could be whatever comes next. But
mhm,
they're all going to play by the same playbook. And that is that middle part of the brain. We all have three functional areas of the brain: the deep reptilian part of our brain that keeps us alive, survival, right? Regulatory, thirst, hunger, those kinds of things. The middle part of our brain, which is more mammalian, it's what a lot of mammals have, stronger and bigger than other species, is this desire to connect, the limbic system. It's the relational, emotional, stress, cortisol, fight or flight response, but it's asking a very different question than the reptilian. And the question it's asking is, am I loved? Where do
mm,
I belong? Where do I connect with, in my case, as you and I, right, with species humans around me? Where do I connect?
mm,
And then we have the thinking part of our brain, that third prefrontal cortex, which isn't fully developed until mid 20s, right? So if you ever said to a teenager in the middle of them doing something, what were you thinking? Well, now you know they weren't. And that's not their fault, because you weren't either when you were their age. This is what we love about adolescents and their ability to just do things and be impulsive and curious and explore the world. We love that about them because that's the part of the brain that is on fire. But that is the part of the brain that is so easily weaponized by an app that wants them to make rash, immediate, emotion based choices that are often not in their best interest. right? So
Wow.
this is why FOMO is such a thing, right? Fear of missing out. Why? Because emotionally, I don't want to be the outcast. Therefore, I'm going to do whatever I can to not be the outcast and do the thing that Be Real wants me to do in 2 minutes, or respond as quickly as possible to a notification on Snapchat or whatever it is. Because if I don't, then I might not belong as well as I could. And that pushes against that question of, am I loved? Right. So this is just from a purely physiological perspective, why it's so important to understand what these apps are doing and how our amazing kids are created and
Mhm.
why they're incompatible oftentimes with each other. It's the thing that I say to parents, and I'm a Gen X guy. So, the illustration that I often give is, imagine back in the 80s or 90s or wherever you happen to be, even if you're an older millennial parent, you'll relate to some of these things, right? Imagine when you were going to school, if in your backpack, your parent put in your school backpack your history book, your pens and pencils, and a notebook. And then on top of that, they put your CDs, all of them, your NES, Mario Kart, your Ken Griffey Jr. rookie card, a digital camera, pictures of all of your friends, all of your games, all the DVDs, 5 porn magazines, a TV, and a DVD player, zipped it all up and said, here you go. Now, all day long, I want you to ignore all of those things that are so engaging and are so entertaining and so exciting to your brain. The only 3 things you have permission to touch are your history book, your pencils, and your notebook.
Hmm.
And I know a lot of your friends have access to all these things in their backpack too, and they probably have parents who don't care as much and even let them look at porn and all those things, but you're not allowed to. And if I catch you doing any of those things, you're grounded for a month and I'm taking all those things away. Have a
Hmm.
great day at school. Like, that's essentially what putting a smartphone in our hands, in the hands of our kids, is asking them to do every single day. We ask our children to exert a level of self-control every single day that we simply never had as children.
Hmm.
So I share all these things because it's a bigger question than what app is and isn't appropriate for my child. It's a 50,000-foot question around what digital decisions allow flourishing in my child.
Hmm.
What digital decisions allow my child to thrive and to become the best version of themselves? In faith-based circles, I would ask, what version of technology, what digital spaces allow your child to be consistently in a spot that is good, excellent, holy, admirable, praiseworthy, right? The things that Paul says in Philippians 4:8 is what we should be thinking about, right? And these are the types of questions that I want us asking around our digital decisions that are deeper than what's good and bad, which are deeper than what's the right age, which are deeper than, well, I don't want them to be left out from their friends.
Hmm.
Those are the things that I want us asking when it comes to these kinds of decisions. So I know that was a bit of an evasive, maybe not quite specific way to answer your question, but I think those are the things that we're not asking enough as fathers when it comes to the digital. And I want more fathers making these decisions. Mitchell, I'll tell you, when I look at our following, we have a large following on social media. Instagram tells me the demographics of my following. 95.2% of my 130,000 plus followers are women.
Hmm.
And so I call them the CTO moms, the chief technology officer moms, who are the ones that are most often making the digital decisions in their homes. And we desperately need more CTO dads
Hmm.
who are making these digital decisions, who are involved in these decisions and helping guide their, amazing kids in the way that they should go. So you have an audience of amazing dads doing that. And I hope that they then can become, the type of influence that compels others in their circle, other fathers
Hmm.
to do that, because we definitely need that.
Wow. Wow, Chris, I've never heard it quite articulated like that. Man, that's a powerful, powerful image or analogy of like how would we have responded when we were kids if we were given all that?
That's right.
Unbelievable, man. You're preaching. I love it. I love it. It's great, man. And so, and I appreciate your approach to that question because you're right. It is so much bigger than just asking what singular app or what, piece of software should we avoid. It's so much larger. And you talked about, digital protection, and I know you have a system called, having a tech ready home. And so there's 5 layers to
Right.
that, which we talked about a little bit before, and I saw on your social media. And so I would love, because as you said, I mean, when I look at my Instagram following, I think about 85% of them are men, obviously. And so this is a really great opportunity um, to share with men and to engage with them and challenge them to look through the layers of digital protection that they've set up in their homes to set their children and themselves up for success. So could you walk us through your system and how they can protect their
Yeah.
children?
Yeah, so I'll give those listening or watching this probably about a 5-minute version of our 90-minute core presentation that we give to families all over the world. So we have a basic presentation that is called No Filter: Creating a Tech-Ready Home in a Fast-Paced Digital World. And what we share there, Mitchell, is the 5 values that are within a tech-ready home, right? So we model the right behaviors, we delay addictive technologies, we encourage work and play, we diligently prevent harm, and we pursue authentic connection, right? So these are 5, we'll call them kind of 50,000-foot ideas, philosophies, overall behaviors that we want in a family. We want those 5 things present. Now, within the value, which is diligently prevent harm, that's the one that is most tactical. There are others in there that are fairly relational, like modeling the right behaviors or pursuing authentic connection. Those are very relational. And so we want there to be a balance between both relational, how do we connect with our child, and I'd love to dig in. There's a separate probably podcast you and I could have specifically about the issue of anger in the digital age, because a big part of when I'm talking to a group, and particularly fathers in a group, under pursue authentic connection, is this idea of calm in the midst of digital chaos, and how our anger as dad sometimes actually chases our children into
Mm,
digital minefields that we don't want them to go into, because it is neurologically soothing to look at pornography or to scroll through YouTube or to watch certain things digitally when I'm being treated a certain way relationally.
mm,
And so sometimes our behavior as dads can actually chase our children toward the digital places that provide them neurological calm, even though it's fleeting and a junk food version of calm. So anyway, those are some of the relational components, but the tactical, technical things inside of diligently prevent harm are 5 layers of protection. That's what it takes in the digital age, are
mm,
5 layers. And that bottom layer is relational. Imagine, for those listening to this, a pyramid. So like a 3-dimensional pyramid, if you could, and then slice that pyramid horizontally 4 times so that you have 5 layers in that pyramid, from the widest there at the base to the thinnest kind of little mini pyramid that's up at the top with that 4th line. So imagine there's 5 sections in that pyramid that has been cut. The bottom foundation is relational, and that's where we talk about some of those other values. But then we get into things like your router. So particularly for dads listening or watching this that have younger children, your router is the most important digital device in your house, because it prevents early accidental childhood exposure to content.
mm,
It's not as often that a 7-year-old is looking for something harmful. It's that by typing in their favorite dinosaur, T-Rex, and the R becomes an S, that Google search shows them something that they didn't intend to see, but now it stirs a curiosity that causes them to keep clicking on things that is a natural curiosity about things that they've never seen, that wasn't their fault. But a router can prevent that type of content from even entering the house in the first place. It's like a lock on a door. Nothing, almost all the things that our kids use, Mitchell, our younger kids, are Wi-Fi dependent. So imagine for a minute, like Chromebooks, Xboxes, Kindles, PlayStation, smart TVs. These only get to the internet because of our router.
mm,
They don't have a SIM card. They don't have cellular service. So our router is the most important way to prevent them from accidentally getting to things that we don't want them to see.
mm,
So the joke we kind of make is, if you're a dad, hug your router. Like, it's one of your best parenting tools, your best shield, your best defense. against some of that stuff. And when it tells you that they're trying to look at certain things, when the technical then does its job, it can point you toward a relational solution, which is
Mm.
sitting down in calm, in that pursuing authentic connection, and curiously talking to your son or daughter about the things that they were looking at, not condemning them because they won't come back if you do, and asking them curious shoulder to shoulder connection type of questions during car time, meal time, or bedtime as to why they were looking at some of those things and inviting them into a conversation so that then you can help them not make that choice in the future, right? So you can see how these things start to all sort of fit together. We want them working in unison. So that was layer 2 of that pyramid. Then you get into the device layer, which is for devices that either have a cell card, a SIM card. So you want software like Bark or Covenant Eyes or something on it. You also want software or kernel controls on a Chromebook that maybe moves from home to home because it's not connected to your router. Then you have the location layer. We don't want kids using devices in 5 different places: bedrooms, bathrooms, school buses, sleepovers, and grandma and grandpa's house. Those are 5 trouble spots sometimes. Grandmas and grandpas just haven't often thought about digital safety. It's not because
Mm.
they are doing anything wrong. It's just that their router definitely doesn't have any controls on it. And you've probably given them a phone so you can stay in touch with them while they're at grandma and grandpa's house. So we just have to be careful. And then the last layer, the thinnest kind of small pyramid at the top of that 5 layers, those are the apps themselves. So that's where, like, does YouTube have parental controls? Yes. Does Snapchat have some parental controls? Yes. But to be honest, they suck. So
Mm.
we want to make sure that we're not depending solely on them, because YouTube's definition of appropriate for your child is probably different than yours.
Mm.
So we enable them, but we layer all the others underneath it to make sure that YouTube's not the only one responsible for not hurting your child, because I don't trust YouTube. Right. So that's how the 5 layers of protection
Mm.
within that more holistic framework of how do we behave day in and day out with technology, we hope builds enough layers of protection around our kiddos to do them right. So there you go.
Mm. Wow, what a powerful combo. I love that idea. I mean, my mind is already spinning in so many different directions. Okay, but I also have some questions just around practicality. So I know I talk to men often that are in situations where they've given, actually talked to somebody just yesterday, they give their kids cell phones, then they learn after when the kid becomes addicted or they just won't put it down and they're maybe on questionable sites or using questionable software and there's been this behavior developed, there's been this dependency, and now the question becomes, how do I de-escalate this? How do I take this back, or how do you have that conversation with a child who, as you just mentioned, their prefrontal cortex is not developed, they don't have the ability to think rationally in many ways. How do you have that conversation with them, and what does it look like to backtrack for your children if you're in that kind of situation? Do you have any sort of tips or thoughts to share?
Yeah, I'll share a few. I think it depends on the age, and I think it depends on the type of harm that we're talking about. If we're talking about a child who turns into a rage-filled alter version of themselves every time you take a screen away, for example, right? The first thing I want us to remember is that this is not our problem. Meaning, what's easy to think in that situation is for it to escalate into a dad versus child sort of situation. When our child gets upset because the screen is no longer entertaining them, this is not dad versus child. This is brain against the game. And that might be a simple thing to say, but that mindset shift is all the difference, because it causes us to approach our child with empathy. It causes us to approach our child as they're not being disobedient, bad, or mean to us. I am so thankful in this moment that I discovered what this game is doing to my amazing child. And now I'm going to step in with care and with calm to find a way out of this. Because what kind of dad would I be if I didn't? Right. So it sounds like a simple thing, but I think that belief inside of us is critical for us to behave in the way that we should with our son or daughter, right? Our behavior follows our belief. It always has.
Hmm.
And so I want us to first to believe that. And I think that's the first thing I would say in that kind of situation. And then you work backwards as much as possible to say, okay, here's some firm specific things that are non-negotiable. Here's what we're doing right now in this moment. I want you to give me your feedback on some of these things. What do you think? And you can have your non-negotiables, but you're also looking for ways where they can have a little bit of feedback and a little bit of input and a little bit of agency in some of the decisions that are being made. And you can be very clear with them. You're like, all right, listen, the way that you're responding right now is inappropriate. This is not my boy. This is not my girl. This is not, I'm not assuming, I mean, both boys and girls love games. It's not just a gender thing, right? You are a different version of yourself right now. And I don't like what the game is doing to you. So we're going to step back. We're going to change the way that this is going so that you are a healthier, better version of yourself. And I'm going to lay that out. Here's what it looks like. And if you can prove to me, amazing son or daughter of mine, that the next time I take the game away, you don't respond in this way, do you know what? When you ask me to play, most of the time, the answer is going to be yes. If you've proven that it doesn't control you. But if it does, that's your choice. You've made this choice to respond in this way. So I'm going to take it away. If you get mad when I take it away, whatever you're playing is gone for at least a day by your choice, not mine, by your choice, right? So you're making it very clear from the outset, Mitchell, what their choices are doing. And by making consistent good choices, here's the outcome. You're not surprising them in any way. If you make consistent bad choices, here's the outcome. I'm not surprising you in any way. You know way up front how this is going to roll. And that way, I just think they tend to be drawn into by their own choosing into a little bit more compliance. We're not surprising them with consequences. We're not surprising them by our response. We've made it very clear what this is going to look like. So those are just some kind of principles that I would wrap around this. When it comes to older kids and pornography, it's a whole different ballgame, right? There's none of this sort of softer relational approach to it. We rip the monster out of their life. Because what kind of parent would I be if I let this thing continue to destroy your heart and mind? And this isn't because I am mad at you, amazing son or daughter of mine, because if I had pornography that was 3 clicks away when I was 15, I don't know what would have happened to me. So I'm so sorry this happened to you. And there's nothing that you could choose to look at or do online that would ever change the way that I feel about you. You are safe and secure with me, but we are going to take evasive action to remove this monster from your life and from our family. And I want to do that with you. I want to do this together because ultimately, amazing child of mine, I want you to succeed. I want you to be well. And I want us to get past this, us to get past this. And so you do relational and technical things, or you say, okay, here's the deal. I still love you. You're not in trouble, but I'm going to take the phone away for a little while so we can figure this out, right? You lead with grace. You don't lead with the hammer. If you lead with the hammer, they'll never hear the love. You lead with grace to let them know that everything is going to be okay. Because in the moment that trouble or chaos is happening in the life of a teen or a child, they need to know the answer to 2 questions. They need to know the answer to, am I going to be okay? And they need to know the answer to, are you still okay with me? And so our response in that moment, and this gets back to practicing, our behavior is a product of our belief, right? So we have to practice these things in our room as dads. We have to practice how we're going to respond to every horrible thing that we hope never happens to our son or daughter, and know exactly how we will respond in that moment. Because if you don't, guess what? Your 35-year-old limbic system will make decisions instead of your 35-year-old prefrontal cortex. Our emotions respond 5 seconds faster than our thinking. If you haven't practiced it, you're not going to know what to do. It's like free throws. It's just muscle memory at that point. We got to practice it. Right. So these are just some big kind of things. There's some variables in there that I alluded to, again, whether it's gaming, social media, or pornography kind of stuff. And those are the sorts of things we have to be prepared for. I know it's not easy parenting through all this stuff, but imagine being them. Imagine how much more difficult it is for them to tiptoe through this minefield that we have given them and to be consistently held accountable to a standard that we were never able to even achieve as a child. And I just want that to shape the way that we respond to those situations.
Yeah, I love that. I love that approach, Chris. I think it's powerful, and I think it can be so easy to lead with a hammer, as you phrased it,
It is. Yeah.
especially in intense moments when you're fearful of what your child has seen or what could what they may have taken in, and yeah, but when you practice empathy and which is why I love your approach about what would you do if you were a kid and your parents gave you this. I mean, it's so powerful. And I think what I'm hearing you say, when approaching your children is to speak to their identity, not their behaviors, you know. And then I hear you say, it's important to give them the opportunity to make the right choices and to communicate clearly to them the consequences if they don't make the
That's
right
right.
choices, right?
Yeah, we live in a world of sowing and reaping. I wish that, I wish at times we didn't,
Mhm.
but we often reap the response from the world and from jobs and from wherever you happen to be, from the choices that we make. And I want our kids to sort of see that, especially in a digital world where it's not like walking on the sand in a beach. I live in Michigan, right? So we're surrounded by water and beaches, and those footprints disappear with every passing wave, but our digital footprints don't, and
Mm.
they live on into perpetuity. And I want our kids not in a spirit of fear. Nobody responds well when we're just using scare tactics, but that there's a reality to that kind of permanence that I just want them to be aware of, so they can know
Mhm.
what the outcomes are from some of their choices. And but there's a danger in that. So I think sometimes we got to make sure that we balance that out, because to say to a child, well, everything you do stays online and you can never get rid of it, that's not a very grace-filled message. There's always redemption, there's always recovery there. I just want us to know, I just want our kiddos to know that the whole world doesn't necessarily agree with grace or recovery, right? That
Mm.
there are laws that don't just look the other way, in terms of grace or recovery. There are some things that can have life-changing ramifications when it comes to our choices online and offline if we're not careful. That's just the reality of living in a world that has, consequences. But from us, from those who know and love them the best, there is always recovery. There's always redemption. And I want them to know that from us as their fathers.
Mhm. And I love that, those two questions you said every, teen is asking, am I going to be okay? And are you okay with me? I know probably sometimes, I mean, I don't have teens yet, but I can certainly remember being a teenager, and
Yeah.
it can be so hard. I think in the heat of the moment, it can be so hard to think that that's what they need when they're maybe mouthing off, or they think that you're, irrelevant and you don't know anything, and they're talking to you, in that light. But for you to just be able to maintain your composure and say, what this child really needs is to know that they're going to be okay, and to know that I'm okay with them. It's got to be tough. It's got to
That's
be
right.
tough.
Yeah, it is. And that's why, unless you've practiced it, we practice presentations and proposals and all these things we want to go well so that we know what to say, we're prepared. And that's why I think it's a good idea to kind of lock ourselves in a room and write some of this stuff down and get in front of a mirror and practice what we would say. And after we say all of those things, you say to yourself, I'm not going to freak out, not going to freak out, I'm not going to freak out. Our calm as fathers is what our homes need. There is no version of your child, there's no child in your home that is a better version of him or herself because of your anger.
Mm.
Nobody is compelled to behave better because you're consistently angry at them. So I need our children to see the amazing God-given attributes that many of, that we all have as fathers, and that is a stability, a calm in chaos, a strong place for them to be. Um, and that's in our facial expressions, that's in our tone of voice, that's
Mhm.
in the types of words that we use. All of those things truly do matter. Our kids are paying attention to them. I used to joke when I was in middle school and in ministry, especially middle schoolers, because they're just spongy. They all have a bunch of little radars, little antennas that are up all the time, and they're sniffing all the adults around them of who they can and can't trust, and they can smell a fraud a mile away. They
Mm.
can sense it. They can tell who's with them and who's against them, and they just have an uncanny way of sort of figuring that stuff out. They're just in tune with us, and so just important for us to remember as dads kind of the influence that we can have, not as a pressure or oh my gosh, no, we all have the ability, the ordained ability to do these things. I think we just need to live into it and embrace it. So
Yeah, I feel like I've been having this conversation so much lately. But oftentimes when I'm talking with men, I'll say sometimes as men, as fathers, as husbands, it's our responsibility to be the lowest heartbeat in the room, right? And if you can do that and
Oh, that's
maintain the
good. That's
calm and
good.
composure, and
Yep.
that's for my wife, that's for my kids, you know.
Yep.
And just I walk men through exercises of, preparation when you park the car in the garage before you walk in, because you don't know what chaos is waiting on the other side of the door. How will I, present myself? How will I show up for my wife in that moment? How will I show up
That's right.
for my child in that moment? And and I know it's done wonders for me as I learn to grow to be that way. I say all that to say I completely agree with you, Chris. I think it's huge, and I know, and I also say this often. It's just that there's something about the emotional tone that the man carries into the room,
That's
into the
right.
family, right? It's significant. And when if dad is mad, if dad is upset, everybody feels that, right?
I
Um,
do.
and so it's so important to think about that. Lowest heartbeat in the room. So Chris, I have two more questions for you. You mentioned that the vast majority of your following is females at this point on social media, at least. But
It's really
now,
interesting to see what the algorithm feeds me, Mitchell. I wish I could show because here's the I hope there's a little bit of a laugh. Instagram thinks that I am either a pregnant 35-year-old woman or a woman who is currently breastfeeding their child. Like they just believe that because it's really funny, like the accounts that feeds me on, being a new mom or what to do when you're expecting. I'm like, yeah, you got it wrong.
nice, nice.
So there you go.
That's
Sorry, I totally interrupted your train of thought, but
no, that you know what? All of mine, all of what it feeds me is like workout videos and like panda videos of like them falling off things and eating bamboo. So apparently, those are the two things that I look at. So
apparently, yeah.
so in this situation, you have you're in front of a very specific demographic of, a bunch of men who are probably around the age of 25 to 55 who are, younger dads. If there's one thing that they could take away from this conversation, from this episode, when they, park the car, power down the phone, whatever, when the episode is over, what is it you want them to remember from this conversation?
I think bottom line, it would be you'll win in the digital age through relationship and not technical knowledge.
Mm.
I mean, both are necessary. You need to know some things about how Snapchat works. You better have a good router in place. I can teach you those things, but there isn't enough. There aren't enough toggles and switches and parental controls that replace your role as their father.
Mhm.
Right? We still need to be intentional. We need to be consistent and persistent with all the things that we want them to know. The thing that we say is, when it comes to things we want them to know about how to interact online, how to behave online, the things we want them to know, like you can always land safely and softly with me even at 2 a.m. Like I want our kids who are 4, 14, and 17 to know that. And what we tell parents, and I'll tell fathers, is unless they're rolling their eyes and finishing your sentences and a little bit annoyed that you're saying it again, that you're not saying it enough
Mm.
because the algorithms in their life are persistent. And I want our words of encouragement, of invitation, our words of curiosity to be more persistent and consistent than the algorithms that are telling them a lot of other things that are chaotic and noisy. Right.
Wow.
So I need the technical, but I want you to pursue the relational. That's why our tech ready home framework starts with the relational. The bottom layer there is all relationship. You got to build the technical on top of that. So,
Mm.
if I were to ask you, especially young dads, or even dads of teens, does your child, like if I didn't give you a chance to go talk to him first, could I pull your child into a conversation right now and say, do you believe that your father would not freak out if you told him you were in trouble? Like, do you believe that you can land safely and softly and right in your father's arms and everything would be okay no matter what
Mm.
happened or whatever you did? Like, I want kids to be able to go, yeah, yeah, because he's told me that 100 times since
Mm.
last week. I'm exaggerating a little bit to make a point, but those are the types of questions that I want kids to know the answer to.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. Be as consistent as the algorithm, really, at the end of the day with all these different, words of encouragement and love and, pouring love over them and grace and acceptance and things like that. I love that, Chris. Thank you. The second question, and I ask this question to every podcast guest. And the question is this, because it's a little bit morbid, but I find that, I've always thought, I've always thought about death probably a little bit more than the average person, but I find that the more that I think about my mortality or my death, the more it informs me on how I ought to live. And so I want you to picture with me for a moment. Unfortunately, you pass away and your family are sitting
I do
around.
this all the time.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, I'm in good company. So your family are sitting around the table, the funeral's over, and the guests have all left, and your kids are sitting around the table with your wife, and they are just reflecting on Chris, the husband he was, the dad he was. And you have this unique ability to kind of have this fly on the wall experience, out of body experience, if you will. And you get a chance to listen in on your kids and what they're saying. What would you want them to say about who you were, the father you were, and the life that you lived?
Well, I mean, almost without saying it, I'm sure people have listened to this. I would hope that they would, because of, maybe what they've heard in church or know about Jesus, go that he tried really hard and modeled the love and the grace and the forgiveness that I've heard people talk about with Jesus. Like, I would want them to believe that about me, that I tried that. I have failed miserably plenty of times. But on the whole, I would hope that 51% of the time they would believe that I tried to do that I tried to point them in that eternal direction. I guess secondarily, I would, hope that they would say, and this is sometimes an illustration I've used with kids, that, the dash that I was given, I did as much as I could with it for the good of humanity.
Mm.
The dash is that which lives between our date of birth and our date of death. Everybody on their gravestone has a dash. And all the words, can be there, but I want them to walk away. And I do this. I have a running route that goes by a cemetery, and I'll think about this scenario all the time as I run by this cemetery, and I think about all the lives there and what impact did they leave, and they're no longer able to do certain things because they're not here anymore. And I want people to run by, if they saw me, go, yep, with that spot he had in between those two dates, he did what was good for humanity. He gave more than he took out of this planet. So that's what I hope. I hope that they would say things along those lines, and we'll see. Hopefully I'm not a fly for 40 more years, Mitchell. That's my hope.
Yeah, let's hope, man. Yeah, because you got a lot of good work yet to do. There's a lot of things that I think, man,
Amen.
you're just warming up. So this is great. Last thing, man. So anybody, like I said, who maybe hasn't heard of your stuff before, where on the internet can they find you? How can we support you? What can we buy from you? Tell us all about how guys can find you.
Just come to the website, protectyoungeyes.com, which, depending on when you visit it, might be totally new. We're about ready to launch it new in just a matter of weeks. We are fairly active on social media, even though it's not always great for all of us. We're trying to use it for as much good as possible. We do have a course that is this framework, right, that I've talked about. We just finished what I call a boot camp version of it, which was an accountability walk alongside for 4 weeks. We even kind of gamified it a little bit, where by completing courses and getting through quizzes and things, there were prizes and drawings attached to that. And we just had about 55 people go through that and just found it incredibly beneficial. We all know that you buy certain stuff and then you don't ever do it. So it's this accountability boot camp version that I would love for more dads to be a part of, to walk alongside, to learn all the tactics and tricks and tips and ideas for some of the things we've talked about, and then practice them. The whole point of the boot camp is then to practice them at home. So look for that. And the best way to know what's happening in all of those digital spaces, Mitchell, is about once every 3 to 4 weeks, we publish something called the download. It's sort of our overall summary of all of our activities, where we're presenting, what I'm doing legislatively, where I'm testifying, what things we're releasing and sharing. It's just a simple newsletter. We spend a lot of time on it, about once a month, but it's sort of the one-stop shop for all the things. So maybe in the notes to this, you could share just a quick link for men dads to subscribe to that, and that'll kind of give you the overall summary of all the things that are going on. So
I love that. Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm going to put all the links to everything you mentioned, the website, your Instagram, and these resources in the show notes below. And whatever streaming platform you are listening, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever the situation is, the links will be below. Do yourself, do your family, do your marriage a favor, and connect with Chris and what he's up to, because your kids will thank you greatly for this in years to come, and you'll be glad you did it as well. Well, Chris, thank you so much for taking this time to spend with us today. I appreciate it so much, and this has been an incredible conversation. And there's so much more that I want to unpack, but we don't have time. But thank you for sharing, and I just really appreciate your time, brother. I hope you have an incredible week, and thanks for joining us on the show.
thank you, Mitchell. Take care.
Wow, what an incredible episode. Listen, if you are watching on YouTube today, I want to hear from you, okay? Leave it in the comments below. What was the big takeaway for you? What was that big aha moment? And let's start the conversation. If you've listened to this episode and you've decided that you want help today, if you need coaching, if you need some resources, feel free to please reach out to me. My email is mitchell@dadnationco.com. My website is dadnationco.com. You can hit me up on Instagram @dadnationco. And I've got a ton of resources for you. I'm here to help you, support you in any way I can, and to serve you in a powerful way. So check those links. I'll have them posted below. But other than that, listen, I'm here for you. I'm in your corner. Have an incredible week. We'll catch up soon.